Hello, everyone, and welcome to Macquarie's Speech Pathology and Audiology Information Evening. My name is Sienna, and I'm a current student studying a Bachelor of Speech and Hearing Sciences here at Macquarie. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the First Nations people of Australia and elders past, present, and emerging. I'd also like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander guests in the audience today. As we allow some time for our attendees to join us online, please note this session is being recorded and will be shared with you after the event. If you do have any questions throughout the session, please put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We'll answer those questions during our live Q&A session later. We have an exciting evening planned ahead for you, and I'm pleased to welcome our speakers. Dr Jae-Hyun Kim, the Senior Lecturer of our Master of Speech and Language Pathology, Dr John Newall, our Course Director of our Master of Clinical Audiology, Bronwyn Van, who is a Master of Speech and Language Pathology student, and Elizabeth Kim, who is also a Master of Speech and Language Pathology student, and finally Lily Lever, who is a Master of Clinical Audiology student here at Macquarie. Without further ado, I'd like to hand you over to Jay, who will start off by providing an overview of our Master of Speech and Language Pathology. Welcome, Jay.
Hi, everyone. I would also like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that I'm on this evening, the land that's been nurtured and continues to be nurtured by the cultures and customs of the Darug people and Wallanatagal clan since the dream time. I would like to also acknowledge and pay my respects to the elders of the Darug Nation, past, present, and especially the future. Welcome to the information evening. My name is Jay, and I am a senior lecturer in the Master of Speech and Language Pathology course in the Department of Linguistics at Macquarie University. So speech pathology is a professional field dedicated to supporting people who have communication and swallowing difficulties or disabilities, including adults who have an acquired brain injury as a result of a stroke or a traumatic brain injury, children with neurodevelopmental disorders, including developmental language disorder, autism spectrum disorder, and those who are communicating by a spoken language, and older adults who have progressive neurological conditions such as Parkinson's disease, dementia, and motor neuron disease. Speech pathologists diagnose or identify communication and swallowing disorders in a range of populations, implement intervention plans for them at an individual level, but they also work at an organizational or even at a higher, sorry, I'm just checking the chat, at organization or even at a higher level, for example, to improve speech pathology services and advocate for people with communication and swallowing disabilities by, for example, lobbying the government for better policies for people with communication and swallowing disability. And reflecting the diverse work that speech pathologists do, you can often find speech pathologists working in diverse contexts, and these include schools. Speech pathologists who work in schools may also work directly with individual students with speech language literacy and communication needs, but they might also work with teachers to implement evidence-based classroom strategies to implement education participation, to improve education participation of those students, and work with the education leadership to improve school policies. Speech pathologists also work at hospital, from neonatal intensive care unit, managing communication and feeding difficulties in vulnerable infants, to acute stroke ward. And speech pathologists work increasingly in private sector, working in private clinics, especially with the NDIS emerging as one of the key sources of funding for those who have communication and swallowing disabilities. You can also find speech pathologists working in somewhat less expected places, including justice department, especially in youth justice, to act as a witness intermediary. And speech pathologists are now having increasingly important role in the justice system to help those with communication disability navigate through the justice or the court system. Speech pathologists often also work in music sector. For example, when Matilda musical team toured Australia, they toured with a speech pathologist who helped manage vocal health of the actors and singers in the musical. And of course, you can also find speech pathologists working at places like Macquarie University and National Acoustic Laboratory, who work as academics or research speech pathologists. Master of Speech and Language Pathology course, or MSLP course at Macquarie University, is an externally accredited course. The Speech Pathology Australia is the professional association that evaluates the speech pathology courses in Australia to determine whether the graduates are ready to enter the profession. And MSLP at Macquarie University has been going over 20 years now, and we're periodically and continuously externally accredited with our current accreditation cycle ending in 2026. We then do another cycle of accreditation then, and this is the case for the accreditation process for all speech pathology courses in Australia. So graduating from MSLP at Macquarie University means that you can work as a speech pathologist in Australia and become a member and apply for certified practicing status in Australia. In addition to that, Speech Pathology Australia has a mutual recognition agreement with other associations, including the US, the UK, Ireland, Canada, and New Zealand, meaning that graduating from Macquarie University enables you to work as a speech pathologist in these countries as well. Master of Speech and Language Pathology course is a graduate entry master's course in speech pathology. So we require an undergraduate degree with units of study on language development, psychology, phonetics, phonology, psycholinguistics, and syntax. You could have completed these units through the Bachelor of Speech and Hearing Sciences from Macquarie University, or an equivalent degree from an Australian or overseas tertiary institution, or other bachelor's degrees majoring in psychology or linguistics. And if you're currently completing degrees other than the Bachelor of Speech and Hearing Sciences or equivalents, you need to ensure that the prerequisite units are included in your current study plan. We also require a 1 to 2 page personal statement as part of the application process. So personal statement needs to contain information about your understanding of the profession of speech pathology in Australia and your experiences with speech pathology and or why you're applying for MSLP course at Macquarie University, and any information that can contextualize your application. And this may be that you have lower than usual grades in one session, which has then negatively affected your overall WAM. And you can use the personal statement then to contextualize something like this. And more information about the entry requirements and the course structures can be found in the course handbook. And I should note here that MSLP at Macquarie University is available either as a 2-year full-time course or an equivalent part-time course, which is also described in the course handbook. There are many speech pathology courses in Australia, and if they are accredited, they fundamentally cover the similar contents, but how we go about doing so, or our approach, or our pedagogical approach or philosophy can be different across the courses. And being the only course in Australia to be housed within the Department of Linguistics, one of the key themes and defining characteristics of MSLP at Macquarie University is a strong focus on application of speech, language, and communication sciences in speech pathology practice, especially given the articulation with the Bachelor of Speech and Hearing Sciences. We have a heavy emphasis of applying linguistic theories you've learned in your undergraduate degree into clinical practice with an opportunity to study alongside industry partners. And one of the significant manifestations of this is that Macquarie University is currently the only speech pathology course in Australia to offer a unit of study specifically about managing multilingual individuals with speech, language, and communication disorders, with the theoretical and foundation knowledge about multilingualism presented throughout the Bachelor of Speech and Hearing Sciences applied into management of speech, language, and communication disorders in multilingual children and adults in the MSLP course. Pedagogically, we are also focused on providing our students with constructive learning opportunities to help them develop into clinicians rather than just technicians who formulaically administer assessments and interventions, and preparing our students to work now, but also for the future. As part of MSLP course, our students complete a range of clinical placements from the very beginning, and you'll have a total of 6 different placements, all of which are tailored, arranged for you, with an experienced clinical educator in each of your placement to facilitate your learning on site. And these are some of the clinical placement sites we offer our students, including the MQ Health Speech and Hearing Clinic and Macquarie University Hospital, and a range of external sites. Employment opportunities as a speech pathologist are good, and speech pathologists are employed in a range of settings, including hospitals, schools, private practices, and our students usually start getting job offers at the end of the first session in the second year of the course. And now we'll hear from 2 current MSLP students. The first student presenter is Elizabeth Kim, who is a full-time MSLP student in her second year. And the second student presenter is Bronwyn Van, who is studying MSLP in a part-time mode. And if I can now ask Elizabeth to speak. Yeah.
Hi everyone. My name's Elizabeth. And as Jay introduced me, I'm the full-time student in the MSLP program at Macquarie. I'm 23 years old, and I also do speak Korean. I entered the MSLP program following my completion of the Bachelor's of Speech, Hearing and Language Sciences undergraduate at Macquarie as well. I initially found out about the Macquarie program after HSC and through the Speech Pathology Australia website. And given the competitive nature of this program and getting into it, I tried to gain as many experiences as I could. So along the way, I had several jobs tutoring young children and working as a junior ABA therapist, which I still do now. And as I have a keen interest in working with the Korean population in my future, I also spent a year abroad completing an exchange program and working as a foreign language teacher through the Global Leadership Program at Macquarie University as well. So for me, given my keen interest in working with the multilingual population, it was important for me to find a course that could support my knowledge in this field. So I found Macquarie and Melbourne were the only universities with a multilingualism unit, and Macquarie in particular was the only university with a general multilingualism unit. I think Melbourne had a Aboriginal, more of an Aboriginal focus. And I also really enjoyed Jay's lecture on DLD during my undergraduate unit, and heard he would also be teaching the postgraduate course. So that also convinced me to join Macquarie. And MQ was also close to home, and it has the metro and lots of bus routes going to it. So it was much more convenient than going to the city for me. And the university also has lots of wellbeing services that are free and very good. If you haven't used them, I definitely recommend them. Compared to other universities, I've heard lots of great things about the wellbeing services here, and I do also use them throughout my postgraduate studies, which is very, very necessary when completing this degree. And I also thought it would be really interesting to study in the Australian Hearing Hub, which is the only one in Australia. So that's what convinced me to study at Macquarie. And my weekly schedule as a full-time student, so during my first year, it included 2 days of classes, which were 6 hours per day. And then I'd have 1 full day of placement, and I would spend 2 days working for a total, for less than 10 hours. And then my Fridays and Sundays would be spent self-studying. And in my second year, so currently my schedule is I completed 2 full days of placement, which is 8 hours per day. And then our class load for the second year is much, much less. So it's 4 hours per day. And then this also included 2 days of self-study and working 1 day. But on top of our class hours, I also complete 24 to 40 hours of self-studying and try to keep work at a minimum of 3 to 7 hours per week. Yeah, and thinking back to when I was applying for the MSLP program, as many of you guys are still doing possibly the speech, hearing and language sciences undergraduate, some advice for you guys, I would get the personal letter completed as soon as possible, because I was trying to really cram in my assignments and I've lost a little bit track of the timing. But getting lots of revisions and writing that letter is really important in securing your space in the program, as it really shows who you are and why you deserve a spot in this program, opposed to anyone else. And applying in that letter, applying what you know about being a speech pathologist or why you want to be a speechy, and any experiences that you've done that you think are relevant. Even if you've possibly worked in like a cafe job, relating that to like communications and, you know, really drawing in any experiences you've had into showing who you are as a person and what attributes you can bring to this profession and this degree, I think is really important for that letter. And being prepared for, once you get into this course, being prepared that there isn't many breaks throughout this course, since we have 6 placements throughout the entire degree, and having a job that is really flexible and requires not as much time or commitment is really important for getting through this degree. So I really recommend those as a full-time student. Thank you. And I'll pass you over to Bronwyn now, who's the part-time student in our course as well.
Great. Thank you, Elizabeth. And hello, everybody. My name is Bronwyn. I'm here as a part-time student coming from a non-speech and hearing background, and I'm in my 3rd of 4 years of study. So I am part-time. Alongside that, I have flexible part-time job and family commitments in raising 2 teenagers. My employment background is in corporate roles in marketing and administration, and I'd also taken a career break to raise my family. So why speech pathology? Well, I was inspired by experiences I'd had with my children as preschoolers, and we'd been involved in doing a home program for speech sound disorders where the parents taught to implement the therapy. And I had a really positive experience with that as a consumer of speech pathology services, and my kids were able to get to be easily understood when they went to school. I was impressed with how quickly the results occurred, and I really enjoyed doing the intervention with them. I'd also had some discussions with friends in the medical industry who knew me and knew speech pathology and thought it might be a good fit. And so both these things really prompted me to research the profession, including attending this night a few years ago. And I guess at every point along that research journey, it just reinforced my interest in the subject area, and the decision was really easy to go on with the course. So my path to coming to Macquarie is that I had a Bachelor of Arts in Communication and Marketing. So it was a degree in an unrelated field. And that meant I did need to complete some prerequisite units in psychology and linguistics. And at the time, I was able to do that via the Diploma of Speech and Communication here at Macquarie. Once I'd completed those units, I applied to the MSLP with the evidence of study and also the 1 to 2 page personal statement. Why Macquarie? Well, I had a really positive experience doing the diploma. I was really impressed by the passion and enthusiasm of the lectures and the really wide range of expertise that was here. And I found it to be a really supportive learning environment. It's a really beautiful campus. There's great facilities in terms of the courtyard and eateries, lots of parking and public transport. And of course, as Jay and Liz have mentioned, the speech and hearing clinic, which as students, we have access to that clinical expertise and the resources and also placement opportunities there as well. So an average week for a part-timer, if I look back to my first semester, there was 1 day a week on campus for lectures, then 1 day a week doing clinical placement for 12 weeks of the semester. And then on top of that, you'd have pre and post class work, which might be, readings or doing some sort of application of what we'd learnt to case studies. And then on top of that, there'd also be assessment tasks. And even as a part-timer, I guess I would say I think there is sort of more and less intensity over the course of this semester. I don't know how anyone ever manages around assignment time to stick to their sort of usual schedule. So there will be busier and quieter times. What I really like about the MSLP at Macquarie now that I'm here is the class size. The scheduling of classes is really convenient, just coming in the 1 day usually. The wide range of placement opportunities, including in regional and remote areas. And for me, Macquarie continues to be a really supportive and positive learning environment. I would say some of my highlights so far include clinical placement, when you see the difference that speech pathology can make in someone's life. So if someone's been working really hard on something and makes a breakthrough, or a parent tells you some really good news, it's very inspiring to think that you might have had a part in that. And also, the more I learn about speech pathology, the more I realise the really wide range of career options there are. As Jay alluded to in his discussion, it really can go to so many different places. So some tips about doing the application. I guess specifically when I think about the personal statement, and for someone who might not come from a speech and hearing background, I would say think broadly about the experiences you could include. So maybe you've worked with a particular population, like some of the groups Jay mentioned at the start. So for example, I had done remedial massage in residential aged care. I'd also done some multi-lit facilitating, teaching literacy to primary school kids. So I had some experience in those populations, and I also knew that I liked working one-on-one with people. Or alternatively, your own experiences with speech pathology services as a consumer. I guess anything that's going to demonstrate that you're familiar with what speech pathology is and the skill set required. I did find completing the prerequisite units was a really good way for me to confirm interest in the subject area. Also my own ability to return to tertiary study after a really big break, and a good way to try out Macquarie. And finally, if you are successful in your application and haven't been at uni recently, I would say take advantage of the supports that Macquarie offers in terms of the wellbeing, but also things like the referencing, the writing skills that you might not have used for a while. At the very least, you'll get that confidence boost that says, yeah, I did know how to do that, or you might pick up some new skills as well. And that is me. I'm happy to answer any questions in the Q&A, and good luck.
Thank you so much to all of you. Thank you, Jay, for the comprehensive degree overview, and to Bronwyn and Elizabeth for sharing your study experience at Macquarie so far. As mentioned, if you do have any questions, you can please pop those in the Q&A drop box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to them later in the session. I'd now like to invite Dr. John Newall to give us an overview of our Master of Clinical Audiology. Welcome, John.
Thank you very much. And welcome, everyone. Hopefully you can see my slides. Oh, there we go. So I'm going to talk to you today just about the Master of Clinical Audiology program. First, I'd just like to start by sort of reminding everyone what audiology is, because it is a fairly niche profession, as we'll see. But basically, audiology is the science and art of the prevention, the detection, diagnosis, and management of hearing loss and its associated disorders. As an audiologist, you may be called upon to provide diagnostic services to people with hearing impairment. You might be assessing the hearing of adults, children, neonates, and you might be doing that behaviourally, or you might be doing it with some objective tests. You also might be called upon to assess the vestibular function, the balance function of patients as well. That's part of an audiologist's role. You also, of course, will likely be involved in providing some rehabilitation to people with hearing problems. That might be fitting assistive listening devices, it might be fitting hearing aids, cochlear implants, bone-conducted implants, or a variety of other implantable devices. And it might also be, you might also be involved in providing auditory training for people with hearing loss, and certainly also potentially managing people with tinnitus, with a ringing in their ears. Of course, we also are involved in preventative care for hearing. So this might be educating people about the dangers of listening to loud music, loud noise, industrial noise, and that sort of topic as well. And we do work with other partners, so people like ear, nose and throat surgeons and other allied health professionals, such as our speech colleagues here, and we work and collaborate quite well with them. In terms of the background of audiology, it's a relatively young profession. It's sort of developed in Australia in the 1940s, so that actually isn't that long ago, although it sounds a long time ago. It's a small profession with about 3,000 qualified practitioners at present in Australia, and we're one of only 7 universities who offer a degree in audiology. It's a 2-year full-time professionally accredited program. It's accredited by our key professional body, Audiology Australia, and graduates from our program qualify to be audiologists. And we'll see where they end up just a little bit later in the talk. In terms of entry to the program, we are not too fussy in terms of what undergraduate degree you have. Although many of our people entering the program have some kind of speech and hearing background, we will take graduates from any potential background. So we have had in the past, for instance, people from a business and accounting background, nursing backgrounds, a variety of backgrounds, in fact, both in the sciences and humanities. Generally speaking, it's a credit average required for entry, so it's a competitive entry, I should say. Although I also would encourage you to apply if you haven't quite passed that weighted average mean of 65, the credit average, because we also do take into consideration other circumstances. We do ask again that you provide, if you'd like, a personal statement or a video, and that would just be, again, similar to what Jay was talking about, telling us about your understanding of audiology in this case, why did you want to enter the profession, any relevant personal experience, and explanation of factors that might be relevant to your application. So, for instance, if you didn't get a particularly good mark on your undergraduate degree and you want to tell me about that and explain why that was, please feel free to do so. And certainly we do take people's backgrounds into account. In terms of the pathways into the degree, therefore, you can have a Bachelor in Speech and Hearing Science. That's a common entry pathway, but a Bachelor of Science is a common entryway to the pathway into the degree, or any other bachelor. There is another option, which I just mentioned, although it's not the primary focus of this talk, but we do also accept people into a Master of Research which for those who aren't so interested in clinical service delivery, but are interested in the field of hearing and audiology and want to take that in a research path, either through a Master of Research or to a PhD, that's another pathway which you should contact me if you're interested in. In terms of what we want graduates to come out of the program with, we want our graduates, of course, to be competent clinical practitioners, but we also want you to be good little scientists and scholars with a great and broad knowledge of audiological and hearing skills following the completion of the course. We do want you to be competent practitioners. We do also want you to be inclusive, cultural, respectful, and ethical practitioners, both with a knowledge of local and global perspectives. And indeed, some of our graduates do go on to practice, for instance, overseas, typically actually in the UK, although we do have some people going to Canada as well. Lastly, of course, we expect you to be professionals at the end of your degree, and that we encourage you throughout the course to be lifelong learners, with the idea that we're going to give you a huge range of skills in the course, but there's going to be plenty to learn even after you leave. In terms of the program structure, just to provide an overview, this has changed somewhat for the cohort who will come in 2024. So the typical pattern is after semester one, after your first year, or after your first semester, is that you'll have a clinical preparation block. You'll have a placement block where you'll be on a block placement, which might be a week-long placement at a particular clinic. And then you'll have online materials supported with consolidations and practical activities. That's the normal pattern. So a little bit different than some degrees because we're doing our placements in a block rather than dribs and drabs throughout semester. However, in the first semester, to help support your integration into the program, we're not going to have that. We're going to have an introductory workshop to start off with, as you can see here on the left. We're going to then continue on into some online material, which will be consolidated in person with workshops and practica activities. And at the same time, you'll be doing some clinical observations, which won't be quite as onerous for you, I think, and will reduce the workload somewhat. And you'll also be looking at doing some practice with your client interviewing and interface skills, which we call our health and wellbeing collaboration placements. But those are just a day or even a half day here and there and are quite flexible. We'll finish the semester with a review class. Following that, in your second semester of your first year and for the second year, as I mentioned, we have this structure of blocks where we're doing some consolidation workshops and practica, then a big block of clinical placements where you'll be out doing work, basically, in a clinic. And then you'll be doing some consolidations, workshops, and practica when you come back before a review class. In terms of job prospects, most of our graduates are employed before they complete the program, and the remainder typically are employed about 3 to 6 months after completion. Following your employment, you'll do a 6 months to 1 year internship, at which point you're considered an independent clinician and can go wherever you like. So what makes Macquarie unique? Why would you come to Macquarie? Some of these points have been hit on already, but just to reiterate, Macquarie University is a global hub for hearing and hearing-related research, education and engagement. And the university has a strategy specific to hearing, so it's a focal point for our university. We have a best practice clinic on site, a large best practice clinic on site, similarly to our speech colleagues as well. And the program offers very good practical experience both in that clinic, but importantly also out in a diverse range of other clinics outside the university. In terms of, again, why study with us and how we're different, well, we reside in the Hearing Hub, which you may have seen, the Australian Hearing Hub building. The benefit of that is there's a bunch of core members of that Australian Hearing Hub. These are some of the big research organisations in hearing within Australia and indeed across the world, and some of the clinical provision providers, big clinical providers in Australia. So we're kind of integrated with those groups in terms of some of our teaching, certainly our research, and practically, physically located within the same building. We're also the first university to have a private hospital on campus with ENT support, and we have some ENT input into our course, of course. We also have state-of-the-art research facilities, which benefit not only students who go on to do research, but those who are doing the course here, because you benefit from having lecturers, people from industry coming to talk to you who have up-to-the-date latest experience and research activities going on in the background. I thought we might just finish briefly by watching a brief video about some of those facilities and the activities going on in that sphere. So I'll let the little video here just play, and hopefully, let me just ensure that I have shared correctly. I have, good, okay.
Imagine you're at a loud party and there's noise coming from every direction. How do we actually listen to a single person's voice? What if you have a hearing impairment? How can we make communication easier for everyone? Audiology and hearing research at Macquarie University aims to discover new ways to answer these questions.
In the anechoic chamber, we actually recreate any acoustic scene, like urban environment, a train station or cocktail party, and test people's hearing ability in a controlled but realistic environment.
The MEG system allows us to see how people's brain respond when listening to speech. This will help us test the effectiveness of hearing aids, cochlear implants, or different therapies.
So we know that normal hearing musicians are particularly adept listeners, and we know that children with a hearing loss have great difficulty with a lot of listening tasks. My research is looking at the benefits that music training might have for children with a hearing loss.
As we age, most people develop hearing difficulties. We're doing clinical studies to find out how to best help them so they can remain an active part of our society.
With EEG and eye tracking experiments, we're finding out how much effort the brain has to put into listening, and our goal is to make listening easier.
At Macquarie University, we're pioneering the next breakthroughs in hearing research, intervention and technology, so we can continue to communicate well, maintain our social connections, and live healthier, happier lives.
So hopefully that gives you an idea of the exciting things that are going on at Macquarie in the hearing and audiology space. And I'd be very happy to take questions in the Q&A afterwards if any of you have them. And I think we're going to have Lily talk to us now, give us some of her experiences.
Yes, hello. Hi everyone, I'm Lily. I'm a Master of Clinical Audiology student in my second year. My bachelor undergrad was a Bachelor of Science majoring in human bio and chemical and biomolecular sciences, so not the conventional hearing and speech science way. I was inspired to study audiology because I wanted to work in a field that would allow me to use technology, science, and interpersonal skills to help people with hearing loss. My previous work was as a disability support worker, and a lot of my clients had hearing loss, so I got to experience that firsthand and the potential and benefits that hearing aids and audiological care can have on a person's life. So that's why I decided that audiology was for me. It was a perfect blend of all my passions together, and I'm excited to hopefully pursue a PhD in auditory neuroscience after I graduate at the end of this year. One of my highlights at Macquarie, there's two. So first one is a clinical highlight. I was really lucky to get placed downstairs at the Shepherd Centre, which, if you don't know, it's an early intervention centre for kids with hearing loss. And a lot of kids who go there have cochlear implants. And so it was really beautiful to, help the kids with therapy and develop to meet their milestones and work with families. One of the amazing days that we got to actually go out to a school, and we got to advise the teachers and staff and building people at the school how to rearrange furniture for a child with hearing loss, how to speak to a child with hearing loss, and how to make sure that the room was sound treated. So that was really amazing to see. And really rewarding. Another highlight is research. I love research. As you can probably tell, I stole the sign from outside to sit in front of today. But yeah, basically this year I'm doing my thesis. I'm doing using a technique called transcranial magnetic stimulation along with EEG, so brainwave measurements and otoacoustic emissions, which probably means nothing to you, but it will soon. So that's what I'm doing. I'm thoroughly enjoying it, and I'm hopefully going to publish that and go my merry way onto a PhD through the Hearing Hub at Macquarie. So that means all of my study will have been at Macquarie. I'm a huge advocate for Macquarie, so reach out if you have any questions. Also, one cool thing that no one's mentioned so far is that we have an audiology society. So I'm the current president of the Audiology Society, and we're a student group that provides support and networking opportunities to our students. So throughout the year, we organise a variety of events, social events, networking, and we also get some really cool excursions. So earlier this year, a couple of weeks ago, actually, we went down to Cochlear, where they manufacture the cochlear implants. And so I don't know if you know, but the electrodes that they insert in are like 1/6 of a hair's width, and they manufacture those by hand. So we get to go and see those labs. We're also developing a potential rural outreach trip up to North New South Wales Casino for the First Nations communities there to screen them and promote auditory health and wellness up there. So yeah, I'm passionate about helping people with hearing loss. I'm excited to start my career as a clinical audiologist and a researcher. And I believe that audiology is such a rapidly evolving field with the potential to make such a significant impact on the lives of people with hearing loss. I'm super grateful for the opportunity to study at Macquarie, and also for amazing professors like John for teaching me for the last 2 years. And thank you for the time and listening.
Well, thank you both to John for sharing all about our Master of Clinical Audiology with us, but also for Lily for sharing her study experiences here with us too. Thank you all to our speakers for joining us tonight. That was really informative and inspirational for myself as well as a speech and hearing sciences student. We will now open up our Q&A session. To our audience, please continue to put your questions in the Q&A box. There have been a few that our speakers have answered via text as well already, so feel free to check those out. But we'll get on to the first one. So is it possible to start full-time and then drop down to part-time in both of our master's degree? Jay, could I direct that one to you first?
Yes, you can.
Fabulous. So is it possible with the Master of Speech and Language Pathology to start full-time, and then if it's maybe a bit too much, can they drop down to part-time?
Yes, you can.
Fabulous. And then would that be the same for audiology too? For John?
We don't have a part-time option, unfortunately, for audiology, so it's full-time only. Yes, as some of the students were saying, it is a fairly busy semester. So it is good to plan ahead in terms of how you're going to accomplish and complete the degree.
For sure. And we had quite a few questions about the application process for the speech pathology course. What would you recommend to be included in the 2-page letter? Jay, I'll pass that one on to you first and then go over to our students as well. What would you recommend that students include in that letter?
Your understanding of the profession of speech pathology in Australia, your experiences with speech pathology and/or why you're applying for MSLP at Macquarie University, and any information that can contextualize your application.
Fabulous. And Bronwyn and Elizabeth, did you have anything that you kind of felt that you wanted to add in your application as well in that letter to really show who you were as a student? I'll go Elizabeth.
I think just as Jay said, like really showing what you know about the profession and relating that to your experiences. So for me personally, I use my tutoring experiences and my volunteering experiences to relate to how I know about the profession and what those experiences show about who I am as a person as well. Yeah. What about you, Bronwyn?
Yeah, thanks, Liz. I mean, similar things. And I think just keeping that really broad focus on it if you don't have direct experience, because, you know, you are working with lots of different populations in other jobs, and that's really good experience when you go in to work with them as a speech pathologist.
Definitely. And we actually had another question that was directed to both of you as well. To our current students, were there anything that surprised you about speech pathology or anything that you didn't expect going in? Elizabeth?
I think I didn't expect that the cohort would be so small, but I found that such like a positive, because I feel like the going from the undergraduate where there's so many students and it's really hard to make friends, to the postgraduate where there's 40 something students, and the community is much tighter, and I think it's much easier to learn together as a group, as a whole group, as a cohort. So I found that really pleasant. And also the placements were very well allocated, and our coordinator, Jenny, for our placements is very considerate about where you are and what your needs are to best suit what placement would be suitable for you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. Bronwyn, how about you? Did anything surprise you about the course going in?
Oh, yeah, look, even though I'd done research, the real broad range of areas where you can be a speech pathologist continues to surprise me. You know, they're geographically or in sort of what environment you want to be in, it's just such a huge area. I guess also just how scientifically based and how deep all the information is. You know, it seems so simple on the surface sometimes, but there's so much more to it. And I guess it's much more complex than I originally thought as well.
And Lily, for you as well, in terms of clinical audiology, was there anything that surprised you about the field that you didn't expect going into the course?
I think just similar to other people, what they've said. Firstly, the amount of work surprised me. I was, prepared, that I thought was prepared enough for postgraduate, but it kind of just hits you and you got to run with it. So that's definitely a surprise. It's great fun and the content is amazing, and you feel like it changes you as a person to learn so much looking back on the last 2 years. But yeah, super busy time. And also it's just the broad array of different jobs you can get. Similar, I think, to speech pathology, there is you can work in a hospital, diagnostic, rehab, tinnitus, counseling, like research. The opportunities are endless. And I think that's something personally for me, is I love learning and I love growth. And so it's comforting to know that I've put all this work in all these years, and I can go and work in a field for 20 years, get a little bit bored, and move on to another totally different field. So yeah, that's what surprised me as well.
Yeah, I think that's one of the great things about both audiology and speech pathology, that the sky really is the limit with how much you can do with both of those courses afterwards. We have another technical question for Jay and John. If you've failed a unit in an undergraduate course, however, you have the weight average mark that's required, will their application still be assessed? John, is this the case for the audiology course?
So if you've failed a unit and your WAM is low because of that, I certainly would still apply, even if you're sort of borderline, because I will be ranking the applications based not only on your mark but also on those personal statements. So even if you've had a failure of a unit, it might be worth addressing that in your personal statement or a video statement which you provide, just saying, well, this was why, or providing some explanation, I guess.
Fabulous. And Jay, would you give the same advice for the Master of Speech and Language Pathology?
Yes. Provided that the applicant still meets other eligibility criteria, meaning that the applicant has an undergraduate degree with units of study that we require or will have by the end of the year. So if the student has failed that unit, then I'm guessing that the student has retaken that unit and have since passed. And in that case, yes, of course, we'll consider it.
For sure. We actually had a follow-up question for you, Jay, about the WAM required for the Master of Speech and Language Pathology. Even though there's a cut-off, what would you recommend that students aim for to get into the master's degree? And also, are there Commonwealth supported places available, like help loans, or do they need to pay up front in this course?
We usually, so historically, students who have credit or above from the Macquarie University undergraduate course have received an offer of place in MSLP. However, it is not the case that there is a cutoff WAM for our course, and that is because we only have limited places available in our course. So that is something that also needs to be taken into consideration. We have about 12 Commonwealth supported places available that are offered on merit base. What was the last question again, Sienna? Was that all?
So say, for example, that they didn't receive one of those Commonwealth supported places. Do they have to pay up front, or is there any other kind of financial support that they could get?
I'm unsure from the university, and I think they can get in touch with student services about that information. But you should, correct me if I'm wrong, Sienna, you might know this better than I do, but people should be able to apply for fee help from the government to access support. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that, and correct us from our postgraduate team if either of us have this wrong, I believe there is still forms of support that you can access. Again, student services is a great way to connect with kind of the right resources for you. But definitely there are options. But yes, you kind of need more information tailored to you, that we don't want to give the wrong information tonight. But yes, there are those 12 Commonwealth supported places. So if you do have any further questions about those, just give us an email to our team, or our postgrad team can pop some more information in the chat if they have it on hand. Thank you for that one, Jay. Moving back to you, Lily, we have a question for you. What would you say the workload is like per week for the Masters of Clinical Audiology? Do you still work a couple of days a week, or if you don't, do you think that that would be possible?
Good question. I personally, for the first semester, I didn't work, or I worked on Saturdays minimal amounts, because it was very a hurdle to get into postgraduate work. For my cohort, there are changes that John mentioned previously, but we start with block, just learning on campus. Each class is 3 hours, so we have one class in the morning, one class in the afternoon. And that kind of goes for 6 weeks. Then we have our placement block, where we get to go on 3 different placements-ish. It changes, but the workload is different for each block. Obviously you're on campus for the study block. For the placement block, you're not on campus, but you have assessment and you have online videos to watch at that as well. So I can recommend, if you can afford it, to maybe just tone down the work for the first semester, see what you're getting into. And then if you feel like, okay, I can get some more hours, then yeah, it's definitely doable. I work on Saturdays as a newborn hearing screener, so that's 6 hours every Saturday, and I try not to work more unless I need it. But yeah, I can definitely recommend to try not to work if you can, because it's very intense. Yeah.
Amazing. We have some more technical questions coming through in regards to the applications for both degrees, which is quite interesting. Jay and John, I'm not sure if you have this information on hand, but people are asking if for whatever reason they applied to both of those degrees, so both audiology and speech pathology, and their previous experience is relevant for both degrees, is it okay for their letter applications to be similar across those applications? If either of you have an answer, I'm happy for either one of you to jump in on this one.
Yeah. Sorry, Jay, I'll jump in briefly. I think it's fine for them to be similar, but it's quite obvious if you have written an application which is, we're asking, as Jay said as well, for why are you interested in this course and this degree. So if you write a more generic letter, it's not going to fit that bill, really. Yeah, but if you write, of course, you're going to tell us about your similar background, so that part's all going to be similar. But as long as you focus the your description of why you're interested specifically in this and what you understand this to be, in at least from an audiology point of view, I'd be happy, of course. Jay?
Yeah, same for speech pathology, yes.
For sure. So I'd say the summary of that is, even if your experience may be relevant to both, make sure to tailor your response to the specific fields that you're interested in, but there can be some overlap. Then a follow-up, which is a quite similar question, a bit related. How many people are accepted into both degrees? Jay, how many people each year are accepted into the speech and language pathology course?
Between 40 and 45.
Fabulous. And John, for audiology?
It's about 50 to 60.
For sure. And then a follow-up in terms of the application process for both courses. Is it based on a first come, first serve basis, or once the applications closes? So are all applications and personal statements assessed and then the students receive the offer are decided, or is it kind of based on first in, first serve? Jay, I'll ask that one to you first for speech and language pathology.
I'm not sure what that means. We assess every single application that we receive. Is that the question?
Yeah, for sure. So I think they're asking, like, is it assessed once all the applications are in? Just because you get your statement and your application in earlier doesn't mean that you have more of a chance of getting an offer than someone who puts it in later.
That's right, yeah.
And is that the same for clinical audiology, John?
Yeah. Now, as long as you get it in by that closing date, then we will wait till all the applications are in. I'm going to rank them and then we'll start providing offers. Yeah.
Fabulous. And then let me this is a specific one I'll direct to you, Jay, about anatomy and physiology requirements for the Masters of Speech Pathology. Which units do you think that students could have from other universities that kind of fulfill that requirement? They've noticed that the speech production unit is not considered as anatomy or physiologies in some other universities.
Prerequisite or assumed knowledge for MSLP application are language development, psychology, phonetics, phonology, psycholinguistics, and syntax. Anatomy and physiology are not prerequisite units or assumed knowledge to apply for MSLP.
Fabulous. And then I'll pop these ones to our students, our current students. Is completing a thesis part of the requirements for any of your master's degrees? Bronwyn, I'll throw it to you. Is it a requirement?
No.
Fabulous. Yeah, so our master's degree, they're not consisting of a thesis. The next question that we have, let me just find here. For the Master of Speech and Language Pathology, Jay, applications close on October 31st before semester 2 results come out. So will applications only include academic transcripts up to semester 1, year 3? Are their semester 2 results not considered?
For the WAM, what will happen is that if you have adequate WAM and everything else is in place before your second session results are finalized, you will get a conditional offer. And once the second unit grades are finalized, then you will get a final offer. You can still accept a conditional offer, but you won't get a place in MSLP until you have the second session results all finalized. So yeah, I hope that answers the question. Yeah.
Fabulous. Lily, we actually just received a question specifically to you. How did you get your position for the newborn screening technician? Was it through a placement at Macquarie?
No, keep an eye out for the New South Wales Health website there. But I will add the placements at Macquarie are fabulous. I get a range of pediatric, tinnitus, vertigo placements. So the placements are amazing, but no, I did not get it through the placement. Keep an eye out at the New South Wales Health website.
Fabulous advice. Jay, a question for you that I think I already know the answer to. Can we send you our personal statements for review before we submit?
You should ideally consider other people. We do not assess or provide feedback on application before the application is due.
Fabulous. Well, with that last question, that is all we have time for tonight. I know I can see in the Q&A box that we have a lot of questions that people have popped in there. We will make sure to get back to you with answers to those questions if we haven't answered them live tonight. But with that, we have come to the end of the session. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and thank you to all of our amazing speakers. Also, a reminder to submit your applications for both the Master of Speech and Language Pathology and Master of Clinical Audiology by 31 October 2023 if you would like to be considered for the February intake next year. Along with a recording of this session, we'll also be sending you an email with a further option to book a one-on-one consultation with our expert advisors. If you do have any further or very specific questions, we highly recommend that you book one of those sessions, as you can get a lot of valuable information and custom personalized tailored information to you. In the meantime, if you do have any other burning questions, please email us at postgraduate@mq.edu.au. We'd look forward to welcoming you to Macquarie University. Take care, everyone, and thank you so much again to our speakers this evening.